Okay, so metric investigation. So this is the classic example. You're the data scientist in charge of, let's say, Amazon Kindle. So you're working at Amazon. Over the last month, the DAUs, or the daily active users of Kindle, drops by 10%. Okay, so your PM asks you why. How do you figure this out? So what this is a diagnosis type thing. Like you're basically brought in to investigate what's going on here. I love this question because it's really an open canvas, right? And I mean, some people hate it because it's an open canvas and there's no right or wrong answer. But I think you can really use it to your advantage from the first step. A lot of people dive in and they start to oh, okay, I have a framework, I know what to do. Boom, let's lay it out. Actually, what I would do is instead of actually solving the problem, I would even question: is this actually a problem? Right? Is this a problem? Like a lot of people just assume that, okay, this is a problem. How do we fix it? And they start going into, I want to understand this segment, that segment, this country, this demographic. Is 10% actually a cause for concern? Right? And because, like in case that's not completely obvious, if historically the DAUs fluctuate by more than 20-30%, right, from month to month, then this is normal, right? Then 10% is actually like, oh, I shouldn't really care too much because it fluctuates so much. But if historically speaking, the DAUs actually are very, very consistent, they only bounce around between 2 or 3%, then dropping by 10% is pretty bad, right? You could clearly see that in a chart. And so I would want to establish first, my first response to this question would be, I would want to understand, is this an expected behavior or is it something out of the ordinary, right? Is this an anomaly or is it just something that is in fact a cause for concern and warrants actually a further investigation? In most cases, in all cases, it's probably going to be a cause for concern. But I think it's always good to put that right out of the bat, because it shows that you actually are not wasting your time in diving into everything, and it also gives you a sense of this person knows about variance and how variance can play a key in these types of problems. Okay, secondly, so let's say we've established that this is actually a drop of concern. Oh, actually, they might say, okay, well, how would you validate that? Right? A lot of the times, interview will agree with you, but then they'll put the question back to you and say, okay, well, how would you validate whether it's actually a cause for concern or not before you even investigate what is the root cause? And so you might say, okay, well, there's two ways I might go about it. I mean, I really love just saying, right off the bat, there's a few ways we can go, and hopefully you actually have the few things in your head. If you get through the first and you actually don't have the second one, you just be honest, be like, actually, the second one slipped my mind, but I can comment on why the strengths and weaknesses of the first. That's always a good defense move. But yeah, I always try to have two things in your head. It always helps. And if you can't think of two things, just make the dumber version of what you're thinking the second thing. So anyway, in this case, how might I validate it? Okay, well, one, I might look at historical data and I might just understand, okay, let's just literally plot out these charts and understand what is the degree of fluctuation. I can just probably look at the min, max, or the 95th percentile and the 5th percentile and understand what is the degree of variation. If on average it varies less than 10%, this might be a concern. If it degrees more, we might need to look into more. This is not even any statistical inference. It's just a very, very high level check. The second approach that I might take is, if we have internal models that actually do future forecasting, right, time series forecasting, I might leverage those models and understand, okay, what did we expect this to be? Did we actually expect this to increase by 20%, but it fell by 10? In that case, again, cause for concern. Boom. There you go. Already you haven't really started solving the problem yet, and the interview is already impressed that you've laid these options on the table. So let's say they say, okay, cool. Let's assume that there is actually a problem. This is not usual behavior. How would you solve it? So this is really where the question opens up, and you can go any direction you like. The core of what's going on in these types of questions is the idea of segmenting, right? Like that's really what you're doing here is like segmenting, or I should say dimensions. Like if you guys are familiar with different kind of BI tools, right? You might have heard of dimensions and measures. So the segments are the dimensions that we're talking about here, right? Examples are, gender, age, demographics, country, right? Region, types of products. Those are all segments, right? And then the metrics we'll get to later. But the idea here is that you want to be able to segment at first a very high level and go deeper and deeper until you find something that is the actual bells and whistles of this problem. So, I mean, like, I think it's always easy to just lay the obvious on the table and say, like, okay, do we have any information on demographics, like age and gender buckets that we could look at? Maybe we have geographic information based on longitude and latitude, so we can look at global regions. We can look at, is it on a continent level? Is it on a country level, or something more specific like DMA, state or city level, zip code? Perhaps there was some new launch on a geographical level that we could look at. I mean, I really don't think that this is probably what's happening, right? When you think about Amazon Kindle, but it's always good to just lay the obvious on the table and then slowly move your way to what you really think it is. And then where I think this is always useful to think about is like apps, right? Like especially if you're dealing with a product like Amazon Kindle, like thinking about app versions or types of platforms. So this is a really nice setup, right? I would say, okay, well, I know the Amazon Kindle. Well, okay, let's say it wasn't the Kindle. Let's say it was like some random app that you can, like Spotify or something, right? Well, Spotify we can use on iOS, we can use on Android. It can be a web app. It can be on smart TV. So there's a lot of different things. Like, why don't we segment by that and understand what did we do a new release on one of these platforms that led to it, right? And so immediately at that point, you're already segmenting not only by app version as well. And then hopefully that signals to the interviewer that, like, okay, I've worked with this type of data before, right? Sorry, someone was screaming in the back. Where was I? Okay, apps and app versions. This is where I'm going to allude to this little key items at the bottom here. Exogenous events, like these are like, I guess you can call them endogenous events, but like, are there things that we don't know about, but then we could ask parallel teams, adjacent teams, like, was there a recent app release, right? Was there a bug in the recent release that caused a particular thing to not work, and then that caused the drop? Product launches, as we mentioned, feature changes, those are all related. And you want to start to develop a hypothesis, right? You want to start like thinking in your head, like, oh, I think maybe like there's a bug in a certain release and that caused X, Y, and Z, and kind of go into different directions. One thing is that sometimes an interviewer there's either two scenarios, okay? One is that they actually just want to see how you think this through. They actually don't have a solution, and they're just going to let you be the driver, right? And they'll just like let you talk until you get so tired or you're out of ideas, and they'll be, okay, cool. And then they might like drill down deeper on one or two things, but that's the end of it, right? Another scenario is where they actually have a root cause in mind. It's not like solving a real problem, but they might actually have something in mind where, like, okay, we actually launched in a new market, but that market wasn't ready to be launched yet, and there's some issues, and so that was a real issue, right? They might actually have the answer. So I would say, like, get a sense of, they're not going to tell you whether there's an answer or not from the beginning. So just get a sense, based on what they're responding, and you can even ask leading questions to try to get out of them. Get a sense of whether there is a real answer or not. Because here are some like signals that there is an answer. If you say, okay, let's take a look at geography, let's split it by that, and let's understand if there's any particular market that had a significant drop. They say, okay, let's say you looked into that and there was no significant drop. What would you do? Like, that question itself is a big signal to me that, like, okay, that person probably wants me to go somewhere specific, right? And so these are cues that you can kind of take from their responses to help you, because at that point, let's say they give you an answer like that. If you feel like you've exhausted ideas in your head and you just give up and you say, oh, those are all things I can think of, that's probably bad. Like that's a signal for you to like go that extra step.